One.
Welcome to the Daily Objective, day 148 of the war in Israel. Morgan, in the episodes 149, sorry, in the episodes that we've done together, sometimes I bring up some historical fact or story or something, and I ask you if you remember it, or I say, well, you're probably too young to remember it, which I hope doesn't come across as condescending. It's just pointing out that you were younger, so there may be things that I remember as a teenager that you were a kid or not yet born. I don't know if I should ask you, do you remember when there was this scandal with UNRWA and countries were like, we're not funding this anymore, we're funding terrorism if we pay for UNRWA. Do you remember that far back?
No, I don't.
Well, this was about a month ago, and when we covered it, we said this is great. It's great that it's happening, but it's not going to last. And I don't know if we should be surprised at how quickly it turned around or how long it lasted, but it is over, or it's the beginning of the end. Some countries still are not funding UNRWA. Let me just bring up this tweet by the European Commission. So they say, "We stand by the Palestinian people in Gaza and elsewhere in the region. Uh, Today, and taking into account the action taken by the UN and the commitments required, we've decided to proceed with paying 50 million euros to UNRWA and increase emergency support to Palestinians by 68 million euros in 2024. We remain fully committed to addressing the humanitarian plight of the Palestinian people." Um, that is from a couple days ago. Your initial thoughts on that, Morgan?
Yeah, and I think that's a statement that was coming out from Ursula von der Leyen, who's the is it the president of the European Commission? So I guess just for context for people then, so they've agreed to give, I think it's 68 million to charitable organizations other than UNRWA, and then 50 million to UNRWA directly, subject to UNRWA agreeing to go through an audit or something like that. It's nice that UNRWA gets to agree whether they go through the audit or not whether they're just treated as a criminal organization. And my reaction in a way is of exhaustion. We were just saying before we went live that there's a bit of exhaustion around the UNRWA topic, but it's exhaustion not with talking about UNRWA, but with just people's reaction. Because in this sense, this is, what I hoped wouldn't happen, but what you have to suspect would happen because it's in line with the status quo. UNRWA bills itself as a charitable organization with altruistic goals, and given that the public morality is heavily altruistic, this is what you would have to expect. It was a big scandal in lots of people's minds when UNRWA was initially defunded, even no matter what was said about it, and they had this almost bottomless well of public goodwill on which to draw, and here we see the end result. And this is in a context of countries in the last few weeks, some of them, Ireland and Spain, I think, maybe even Belgium, restoring their funding or increasing it. And this is just the latest of a major backer of UNRWA coming back around. There are still some holding out, but probably that's going to be for the birds for the next little while. Once the war ends, we'll see whether they come back. And I suspect ultimately they probably will because it won't be so popular anymore. Um, and it's immensely disappointing. I don't know what else to say. I mean, it's awful.
Yeah, by the way,
It's
your
awful.
your connection isn't great, but I think I heard most of what you were saying, and yeah, you mentioned the countries. Yeah, so we have to mention that there were countries that said they're going to stop funding UNRWA, and this is just the European Commission for now that is back to funding UNRWA. But there were also, as you mentioned, countries like Ireland and Spain. Ireland, of course, big supporters of Palestinian terrorism, who immediately their response to the scandal the European Union Commission in this statement said something about them being satisfied by UNRWA looking into things, which of course is bullshit, but is of course the fact that they put that in the statement contrasts them with Spain and Ireland, whose response to the scandal was to continue to make a statement of continued funding or increase funding. What it takes for somebody to make that kind of decision is baffling. But of course, much of what is happening in the world in the past 5 months is baffling. So, and there's something about international opinion and the speed at which it changes and changes drastically to the point where policy changes based on the most recent event. So October 7th happened, and the semi-free countries of the world all expressed not just sympathy with Israel, but support for Israel. And of course, that annoying statement of Israel has a right to defend itself. And some countries were very clear about Israel has to destroy Hamas. I think Britain was one of them. I think maybe even the opposition in Britain. The US certainly was one of them. The US sent an aircraft carrier immediately to basically as a show of not just moral support, but potentially military support. And we saw 10 days later the incident in Al Ali hospital, which of course was Palestinians killing Palestinians, but blaming Israel for it, and much of the world going along with it. And that kind of shifted not just public opinion, but opinion among leaders of countries in the world, and therefore policy. And yeah, this most recent shift, I don't know to what extent it's affected by what we spoke about yesterday. The incident where supposedly over 100 Palestinians died, what propagandists are now calling the Flower Massacre, because that has a nice ring to it, where the Palestinians were stampeding towards aid trucks, potentially killing each other. From what we heard, trying to run at Israeli troops, and Israeli troops shot at them defending themselves. And this was portrayed in a certain way that affected policy to the point of this propaganda has brought in tens of millions of dollars of aid. The U.S. Also decided to start dropping aid on Gaza from above because Israel won't be there to kill the Palestinians trying to get the aid that Israel approves of sending them. So yeah, and this is definitely a cause for concern. Nobody has a principled stance on this, by the way, including Israel. And well, when I say nobody, I mean nobody in the West has a principled stance. The Palestinians have a principled stance, and we know how it goes when principled people fight against pragmatists.
Yeah, and I mean, just on the point of principle, I guess it's something which we've spoken about before, but the way in which people's initial reaction of outrage in favor of Israel and so on is a reaction which was very emotional, but was a reaction of justice. Look, it's saying, look, these people have been attacked. That's wrong. It's right that they should be able to, they should have the right to exist. They should be able to defend themselves and so on. And then you get that slow ebbing away of that sentiment. And someone from the pro-Palestinian side might say, yes, but look, the other sentiment's also based in justice. And I don't think that's true whatsoever. And I don't think Rand would think it's true. There's a way, or there's an area of her work. I wish I could remember where, just off the top of my head, where she speaks about altruism never being appealed to for rational reasons. It's always appealed to through people's emotions. And if you look at the way in which the media or people have tried to convince people of the pro-Palestinian side or the side of the civilians and so on, it has never been through trying to convince you rationally, saying, look, this is what the nature of justice is, and this is why the Palestinians are justified and the Israelis are wrong. It's always through photos, through people putting photos on Twitter saying, don't look away, and so on and so forth. And believe me, I haven't looked away. They're horrific. And it's awful to see them because that's the nature of warfare. But it hasn't changed the argument one iota. And for a lot of people, they're able to be swayed by that. And there's just something so crestfallen about that. And it's awful. And Rand's perspective on justice is that you have to be exacting with it. It's not that you can be just for a little while and then you show mercy at the end, you give up on it because you don't want to be too mean. It's you want to be exacting injustice because you're just to protect the good people in the world and not to give succor and support to the bad people. And that is what the international community has done. It's what the European Commission has done just here, and what these charities have done as well.
Yeah. Bonnie asks in the chat, didn't UN Watch offer suggestions to other ways to provide aid without UNRWA? Yes, and that's the thing. I love the work that UN Watch does. Of course, I don't support this particular idea, and it doesn't matter. This is a statement by the European Commission. This is basically punishing Israel for what the Palestinians say happened in that incident with the aid convoy. Yeah, you mentioned the use of photos, and Leonard Peikoff famously had this lecture, which I recommend people who haven't heard go and listen to after the reality show Extra that follows this show. A picture is not an argument, but the people who use a picture as an argument know that it's not an argument. They just know that if they made their argument, that would be insufficient to convince rational people, and they also are very selective in how they in the pictures. So you'll see pictures of dead Palestinians. Sometimes they're not actually dead, but they look dead. Sometimes they're not actually people, they're dolls, but they look like dead people. You'll see pictures of the ruins of buildings without, the context of, by the way, Israel made sure everybody, including potentially terrorists, got out of that building. So it's before that building was hit. And yeah, there are things you won't see. So what we talked about yesterday here, some of how Palestinians generally react to humanitarian aid. There's a video from yesterday that was later yesterday after the episode that I think should be played because you'll never see this. This is not going to be, I guarantee you, it's not going to be on the BBC. I will, I will put the license fee up as a bet that's not going to happen. If I'm wrong, I will pay the license fee. If not, I'm exempt. All right, Daniel, play the video. And yeah, this is also from Abu Ali Express, the Telegram group that I mentioned. It's for mostly Hebrew speakers, but you can play it. We're not going to play the audio, right? I don't want to hear that. These are trucks with aid for Palestinians, and they're, just to be clear, the drivers are not Jews. They're not people who are oppressing these people who you can clearly see are oppressed. These are Arab drivers or Arab trucks with aid for the Palestinians. This is what happens, and this is one incident. There are many, many incidents. Look, this on weekends we're here 30 minutes a day. On weekdays, we're here 90 minutes a day. We don't have enough airtime to show you all those videos, and also there's more to talk about than that. But yeah, we hear about the suffering of the Palestinians, and we see the images and the videos that fit that narrative. We don't see the full context. The full context being the Palestinian people did October 7th and did what they did then. This is what they do to the people who are just there to bring them food. Yeah, Morgan.
I think what must strike people as well is the way in which the two sides of this debate, if you want to put it that way, and on the international sphere about what you should do about aid regarding Gaza, is that it's as if they're talking across a complete chasm. That it's almost they're using completely different kind of moral language in a way, and they're almost talking at cross purposes. And I think that must strike people. And I think if people are seeing that and they're confused, I think they're right to be confused, because why do people talk about the same facts as if it's a completely different event? Why do people talk? And so why do people talk about the same things as if they saw something completely different? Isn't reality the same for everyone? And reality is the same for everyone. But what's affecting people's interpretations there is their moral perspective. And that's why, we hammer on about that so much. It's because people are looking at the same thing and drawing the completely opposite conclusions about what's right and what's wrong. And it's led the European Commission to give funding to the Palestinian people, quote unquote, who the Israeli government is at war with. Now, the Israeli government wants to go and destroy Hamas. They've not made their primary objective to destroy the Palestinian people, but they're at war with that, pseudo country, micro country, whatever. So they're at war with that people as a whole, in a sense. And what's their moral perspective has led them to do is to, in a sense, betray an ally, to give funding to their enemy. And another one of these inconsistencies people should notice is, what other war can you think of where that would just be okay, and where the entire weight of international moral force would be on Israel to relent, to allow that into that country? It wasn't that way in World War II. It wasn't that way in the American Civil War or whatever, right? So that should strike people as really odd, and they should notice the way in which people's moral opinions are informing these polar opposite reactions here.
Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Michelle mentions an Egyptian driver was killed after the truck he was driving crashed and was looted. Yeah, again, there are so many incidents of this, and I forgot what I was going to say on this, but yeah. So the reason I've mentioned this, I'll mention this again, definitely in a couple of days when we have episode 1000 of this show, that this channel, used to have a variety of shows on a variety of topics. The daily objective would be on a different cultural or political topic each day. The reality show used to have 3 or 4 topics a day, some of them lighter. We enjoyed, we were, serious when we had to be. Sometimes we couldn't help but laugh at environmentalists for telling us to save the planet by not flushing the toilet. And on October 7th, we became a one-issue channel, and this is the reason. And we've said, Israel is mixed. Israel has very good elements and very bad elements. The Palestinians don't, not as a society and not as a culture. Again, individuals there in Gaza, certainly children are always innocent, but individuals, could be very much against the culture they're surrounded by, and I wish them the best in escaping it. I don't think they can change it, but this culture is so evil through and through in everything about it, that it treats, again, it attacks the people who, while they tell us they're starving, these are the people who bring them food. Somebody who brings you food and you kill them can't bring you any more food. But so the problem here is not just Palestinian society. It's actually not mostly Palestinian society. It is the way we look at it in the West. It is the fact that, knowing what we know about the society, it still has such overwhelming support in public opinion, in the highest levels of government, to the point that they are using our taxpayer money to fund that, to say, look, they're hungry, they might not have enough strength to kill as many truck drivers as they want to. I mean, it's baffling, and this is why this is now a one-issue channel. This is an issue that people really need to understand the gravity of the situation, and we will continue to try to the best of our ability to cover it.
Yes,
And
and just
yeah, go ahead.
I just I guess the final bit of my previous point I missed off is that part of why it's a betrayal of your ally is not just because you're giving aid into the country, but also because, even if you conceive of it as Israel is only at war with Hamas, and we've spoken about that, but that's how a lot of people think about it. We know that that Hamas steal that aid. If you look at the figures of how much aid has already gone in, it might not be enough to support a flourishing society. But for people to be starving in the way that they are, you can't see that and think, I wonder whether Hamas, who is also not exactly producing anything or bringing anything in, has been pinching a lot of that and then leaving any leftovers maybe to the people, and maybe that's why they're starving, and maybe that's why they're treated completely instrumentally by their government. And then, yeah, go on.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't know if I buy the extent to which we're expected to believe that they're starving. But yeah, but long before October 7th, the Palestinians, Gaza was the place where with the highest per capita humanitarian aid in the world, and now it's only increasing. So yeah, but yes, of course, Hamas. We saw one video of that yesterday as well, and again, there are plenty of examples. You can find them of Hamas actually taking over aid convoys, shooting at people coming at aid convoys. There's no flower massacre title given to any of those shooting incidents because it's not done by Jews. But yeah, we know what they do, as do their supporters.
Yes, well, it's also from Hamas's perspective, it's entirely logical to be doing that. Where else are you getting food and fuel and so on from if you're not pinching it when aid is the only real import that's coming into the country? And then the other point being, in regards to the European Commission, if people go look at the press release that was on their website, the whole tone of the European Commission and all this stuff and the nature of a press release is to be very formal and seem professional and sort of like they're taking responsibility, I guess. And this is an abdication of responsibility, really, is I think how people should look at it. Because there is a justified party here, which is Israel, who has to go and do a difficult job, which is to go in and root out Hamas whilst bearing all the international pressure for the deaths of civilians, which are going to go on in doing so. And it's the job of Israel's allies, if they really do believe what they say about Israel having the right to defend itself, is to, screw up their courage to the sticking point and not give in when emotional weight and moral force is plied down upon them, and a phony moral force, I'd say. And that would be what would be properly taking responsibility in terms of your response for what's going on. It would be to stick by your ally, because it's not like the EU, the European Commission thinks that the facts have changed in any way. It's their moral perspective, and it's all the moral force, the emotional weight that's been put upon them, all the pictures and all this kind of stuff. And so I think people should see this and think you've given up. You tried to hold out for a while, as did some other countries, and eventually you gave in. And what should be put to these people is, why did you give in now? Why didn't you give in before? If you were holding out before, presumably you thought there was a good reason. What's changed that's meant that you changed your mind? And is there actually anything, or is it just that you could only hold out for so long before you gave into cowardice? And courage is what's required, and it's what's sorely lacking.
Yeah, and in lieu of that, we have, as mentioned, policies changing based on the most recent headlines, policies that are life and death. That's as clear cut as possible. If you stopped the funding because you believe there was a case to be made that UNRWA actively participated in October 7th, what is the evidence that you have now that that has been dealt with? Again, I support completely dismantling the UN, let alone UNRWA. But like from their perspective, if they want to, provide humanitarian aid, as they say, what proof do they have? And of course, they have proof, to the opposite, to the fact that this is Hamas still controls it. Hamas still takes over anything. I mean, the idea that if it's the Red Cross or the Red Crescent, it's somehow not going to be taken over by Hamas. I don't know. Are they armed? Are they going to fight off Hamas? Of course not. You saw Owen Jones mention something about this, right? But before we go to that, hang on. Willful Thinker says, in the context of the fact that this is now a one-issue channel, bring back the cutting edge. So the cutting edge, for those of you who don't know, was a show that we had on occasionally. I hope it will come back in some form if and when it does, and it's not anytime soon, just because we have limited resources and limited bandwidth, and we are focusing on this. But it will probably be behind a paywall, which is a very good reason to become a member of the Ayn Rand Center UK. There's a link in the chat and in the description. You will have access to things that you don't have access to if you're not a member. You also, one of those things is the many WhatsApp groups that we have, where the conversations that take place on the channel for 30 to 90 minutes a day continue 24/7. So consider doing that. And of course, you can become a member of the YouTube channel And one of the things that will be exclusive to you then would be the reality show extra, our Sunday version of our panel show, which is coming up right after this show. And yeah, so Willful Thinker is a member, and yeah, if and when again it will take time, but when that comes back, that will be where we will air it. Morgan Owen Jones has yet to be mentioned on this show, and we are only 5 minutes away from the end, so I think it's some sort of a record. But yeah, are we mentioning him in a positive light today?
No, we're not, but we're probably not going to be mentioning him too much because that article I found very briefly, like 10 seconds before we went live, is behind a paywall. So I've read one sentence of it, so it wouldn't be fair to really describe it. But that one sentence said that the Scottish government's stance on UNRWA has been vindicated. And I don't think that's true at all. I presume that's because of this news about the resumption of funding. But the Scottish government has not been vindicated. So for people who don't know, the Scottish government's position was not to cancel funding in a sense as a lot of countries did. It paused it for a little while. And it was very clear about that. It wasn't going to, go all the way like these other countries and say we're not going to give again. And it wasn't one of these countries that kept the funding. It just sat on the fence. It just sat in the middle because it was going to wait and see how this goes, feel it out, see where the wind blows, which is what the Scottish government has very often done in many situations. And this is not a vindication just because the European Commission has decided to give back funding. What on earth does that mean? They can be right or they can be wrong, and I very clearly think that they're wrong to be doing this. Nothing has changed about UNRWA. They've agreed. Why they get to agree and why they're not just treated as a criminal suspect in a sense, I don't know. But they've agreed to an audit as a condition for this resumption of funding. So the Scottish government hasn't been vindicated. They were cowards, and as I think I was reading the Iliad today, and courage is a major theme of that book, and they could do with reading it as well because it's what they're sorely lacking is courage to get off the fence and to make a decision and stick with it because that's what justice demands.
Yeah, by the way, for our viewers who are not from the UK, what the Scottish government is might be confusing. I don't think we can fit it into whatever few minutes we have left. But yeah, Scotland is part of the United Kingdom, but it also has its own government, which is kind of like a parasite of sorts, and they kind of can get away with having policies that don't really matter. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. I see there's some conversation, although I didn't see all of it about I see Hannah saying Gush Katif was an agricultural and economic powerhouse. Gush Katif was the Israeli settlements in Gaza. Yeah. The last time there was real productive activity in Gaza was when there were settlements there. I remember when there was the Likud party. I was a member of the Likud party in Israel when there was the referendum of members about the plan to leave Gaza. The Prime Minister Ariel Sharon at the time said, whatever is the result, this is what we'll do. And I remember going and while I was entering the polling station, somebody offered me some cherry tomatoes from Gush Katif, and I said no. You're not gonna buy me. You're not gonna buy my vote with that. I'm voting with you anyway. And I was so happy when the result was very clearly the right one against leaving Gaza. Of course, Ariel Sharon laughed it off and did it anyway, and we are still paying for his time in office today. And Netanyahu, who opposed it but also voted for it, is again as principled as the European Commission and Israel's so-called allies in the West. It is a very unfortunate situation, which we will continue to cover on a daily basis. Not on the reality show Extra. I think we're going to talk about some other things, including this theater in London that has decided to have a couple of days where they don't allow white people into the theater. So we're going to talk about that. And we're going to read some trolls' comments. So thank you, trolls. I see at least one in the chat, one of our regulars. We will read some of that out. Of course, you want to hear your trolling comments read out, you need to pay us. It costs money. $5 a month, or pounds, or euros, depending on where you are. We will, of course, not name you because we do not name trolls. But yeah, Morgan, thanks. Thanks for joining me. You know, this is not a laughing matter, but we do try to be positive people, and we will try to do that with our topic for the reality show extra. Maria is making her reality show debut on the upcoming reality show extra. Longtime viewers of the channel will remember Maria from one of those shows that is no longer around, Flirting with Reason, show about romance. You can scroll back on the channel and find the, I think, 6 episodes of that show that aired. And yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks, Morgan. We will see you in a minute on the reality show extra and back here tomorrow at 5:30.
Absolutely.